Hey everybody, this is Sir Bjorn. You're in Sir Bjorn's workshop. At the request of Her Majesty of the West, I have been asked to create a YouTube video, and one thing I really like to do is train people how to make SCA legal broadswords. Now, go ahead and we'll have a warning right here at the beginning. Please do not take up any martial art, including SCA combat, without going to practices and signing all your waivers. Don't try this at home without talking to the experts first, okay? All right, now that we got that out of the way, these are all the ingredients and tools that I use in order to make a standard SCA broadsword. You start with a stick of rattan. I like a little bit bigger than 1¼ inch. The minimum size is 1¼ inch. I like just a little bigger than that. That's what this is, so we're going to be using that today. And then I happen to really like the plastic Balder cup hilts. You can also get the steel ones, and there's lots of different kinds, but the Balder ones are the most popular right now, so we're going to be using that. You're going to need measuring tape, as well as several other tools. I really like to have a standard click knife. You can get these at a lot of discount hardware stores for like a couple dollars. You're also going to need a crummy big knife. It needs to be both crummy and big. You'll see why a little later on in the video. But the one that looks like it would chop meat really well is actually perfect. Having a combination wood rasp, okay, curved on one side, flat on the other. We're going to be using this to shape part of the grip, and the rest of the grip we're actually going to be using a two-handled draw knife. This is probably one of the more expensive tools on the list, but it makes that whole process so much easier. In addition to that, you want to make sure you have a sharpener for both of these two tools. This can get in the grocery store for $5 or $6. Having these kind of clamps, which for some reason are called spreaders, even though what they do is come together. I don't get that either, but having two of them is super useful. You're going to need a measuring caliper. Typically, these at a discount place are about $4. That's about what I paid for this one, but you can spend a lot of money on these if you really want to. You're also going to need a Sharpie, at least one. Don't be without a Sharpie in your shop, I'm serious. Then, you're going to need a grip. Something, now a lot of people like to have bare rattan grip. I think that's nuts. The tennis people solved this problem like 30 or 40 years ago. Let's go ahead and use the tennis grips. Okay, they're really super comfortable. You're also going to need some scraps of blue foam to make the thrusting tip. You don't need more than about 3 discs of this. And then you need about 4 kinds of tape. I want you to start with shipping tape or strapping tape. You can get this at a local hardware store, along with some people really like medical tape for the outside. In addition to that, I use Gorilla Tape for the edging, and the thrusting tape we do up in red gaffer's tape or cloth tape. This is super, super good, and it's just really nice. Okay, I think that's everything. So thanks for showing up. Please stay to the end of the video. There's a little plug that we really want to tell you about at the end, but let's make a broadsword. Okay. So the first thing we need to do is figure out exactly how long of a weapon we're going to make tonight. So this is Eucrates, my squire. Say hi.
Hello.
Yay, and Eucrates has been using this sword for quite some time. He's done really, really well. But you know when your sword needs to be rebuilt when it makes this very special sound. Can you describe that sound for us?
It's a pretty soft crackling.
Yeah, sounds a lot like celery or a bag of potato chips. Your stick should not make noise except when you're hitting people. Anyway, this happens to be 36 inches long. It's really common size. Eucrates here is approximately 6 feet tall and a medium build. If you are taller and or heavier than Eucrates, you might be able to fight with a longer one. If you're narrower or shorter or both than Eucrates, you might want a shorter one. That's up to you. Typically, the shortest one you want to fight with is about a 32. The longest is about a 42, but you got to be real big to be able to push that weapon. And you got to be strong, and tall helps too. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and go with 36. And by the way, the first thing you need to do with your weapon is, once you cut your stick of rattan, put how long it is in inches on the base, so when it dies, like this one did, you know exactly how long to make the next one. Even if it cracks clean in half, you'll have the dimension. Okay? So, next thing we're going to do is cut out a stick. First thing you need to do is realize that rattan is a plant and part of nature, and therefore it's not super predictable. One end of the stick is actually going to be a different dimension usually than the another end of the stick. So taking your caliper, you can measure, and it's hard to see on the video, but trust me when I tell you this one is nearly 1.5 inches. And this end is just a hair over 1.25 inches. Eucrates wants one that's a little closer to 1.25 inches. So we're gonna take the 36 inches that we need off of this 9-foot stick off of this end. So we're gonna go cut a stick and then we'll come back and get the construction started. So now that we have a cut piece, another friend of ours, Godwin, was nice enough to loan us an even more interesting looking piece so we can show you how to smooth it down. Again, it's a plant. The plant grows in sections. And if you take your crummy but large knife and you hold it against one of these sections like this, and literally as you turn it like this, run the knife like that, what it does is it shaves away these bits of the junction, because edges cut tape, okay? Corners cut tape as well. Tape is what we're putting on this thing to protect it, so you want it to be off. So just go all the way around. It makes a bunch of shavings, okay? Clean those up. Take care of your shop and work area. Don't be a jerk and leave the whole place a mess, okay? But you can also do this pretty much as fast as you want. It can be kind of fun to get together with friends and just sit there and work. Okay, do this for every set of junctions that you have. Even this one, it's kind of a pain, but you should, okay? And then once that's done, we can go on to the next step. Okay, so now that we've actually got our stick cut and shaved, the next part is, because it's a plant and kind of nature being random, we have to figure out which end is the grippy end and which end is the business end. So this is going to be Eucrates' stick. So what he's going to do now is he's going to swing it around with gripping either end and make a decision about which one is the grip. Once you've decided that, you take your Sharpie and make sure that you make a little mark like handle, or even just put the length at the butt end or whatever. So that's what Eucrates is going to do now. And we'll see you in just a sec. Okay, so now that Eucrates has determined which end is the handle end, now we've got to take care of rounding the tip just slightly around the edge. Because remember, corners and edges cut tape. So the way we take care of this is you can use a grinder or a sanding station or whatever, but the way I was taught by our beloved Obadiah the Obstreperous, who we recently just lost, this was one of the best lessons he ever taught, which is you take this, you hold it at 45 degrees to pretty much any sidewalk or other concrete you've got, and scrape while you turn. And it really doesn't take too long before you start getting a rounded edge. You want it a little cleaner than I've made it here, so I'm just gonna do it a little faster. Okay, almost there, but that's the process. You can vary it between 45 and about a 30-degree angle, but it's a pretty forgiving process. You don't want it to be super round because you want a nice resting spot for your thrusting tip, but this is what you need to do. You don't have to do it to the other side because that's just going to be the butt of the weapon. So we're going to take it back into the shop and we'll show you how to create your grip. Okay, so now that we have rounded this end, we're going to go ahead and mark out where the grip is going to be. So we're going to take our cup hilt, this is the top, and we're going to slide it right here onto this so that the bottom is parallel with the bottom of the tab here. Then you're going to take your Sharpie and you're actually going to mark the inside at the top and the bottom on the stick. And you want to make this go close to all the way around. It's just super useful to have that mark there. Make sure that it's parallel, okay? go ahead and turn it, making that mark, because this is how long your grip is going to be. And then what I like to do, in addition to these two marks, is I like to mark where the top of this tab is as well. And you'll see why in just a little bit. Okay, so now that we have that, we know exactly how long our grip is going to be, and now we can go on to the part where we actually shape this for your hand just the way, or close to the way a medieval sword's grip would be shaped. Okay, for this next part, you really have to have your stick be secure. Now what I used to do is have somebody sit on the stick on its flat, and that got super inconvenient because nobody ever wanted to do that more than once. So when you get a really sturdy bench and you get your stick all arranged, you grab a couple of these spreaders. You can get these at a hardware store. Last time I bought them, they were about between $17 and $25 a piece, and you really need 2 of them. So the small trigger makes the jaws go apart, and the big trigger makes them come back together. So you're going to secure this with the grip part past the edge here, and then your spreader actually gets locked down like so. Take your other one, pretty much anywhere along here will do, but I like to have it pretty far along. Makes it a little more stable. Get the spreader jaws apart, and then secure it, and then you're ready to go. The next step is to actually start shaping your grip. So what you want to do first is create a flat on either side, 180 degrees, on the grip. And that's done with a draw knife. So I'll show you how to do that next. Okay, so what we want to do is create a couple of flats to start our grip shaping. So what we're going to do is I actually have this little diagram drawn onto the wall. It's really kind of the advantage of having my own shop, is I can write on the walls. So we start with this basically round shape. It's number 1. The first thing we're going to do is make the cross section look like this. So we're going to take our draw knife. I usually try to sharpen it a little bit beforehand. This thing gets dull during the process, so you're going to have to just sharpen it every time. And what you're going to do is come on over to the stick and go to this top bit right here, okay? And you're going to dig in and draw. But before you do that, you have to take your rasp and take the curved side, not the flat one, but the curved side, and on the bottom here, you're actually going to dig a channel, okay? And it's no more complicated than doing this. Okay, so now that we've got this channel, you can actually see what the channel is for. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our draw knife, put it up to the top of where the grip is, and just make a flat. And when we draw, the knife will actually stop right here, so you still have a nice meaty bit of the rattan to tape onto the cup hilt. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to keep moving left and right with the draw knife blade, so we use as sharp a piece as we can each time. And this is a little bit of an experiment. You're going to have to try a few different flats before you get exactly what you want. And remember, it's super easy to make it thinner, and making it thicker is a little harder. So it's better if you try it often. But this is still pretty early in the process. Now, once you get a whole bunch of these curls down here, you can actually take them off with your draw knife. Don't do what I'm about to do, which is get your fingers right there and do that. That's a terrible idea. Don't do that, kids. That's awful. Anyway, moving on, we're going to go ahead and make this flat a little flatter. Whoa. Here we go. Anyway, when you throw this stuff on the bottom, make sure that you sweep it up later, or, you know, get knighted, have squires, and have them do it. But, you know, I like the first idea better. Anyway, as you go along and make that flat, it's useful also to tip your knife left and right to kind of take the edges and corners off of this. And the more you tip, the less you take off, and it rounds things off a little bit, makes a little gentler flat to it. Okay, so do that. This is probably a good place to stop and test things out, but we have to turn it over and make the same flat on the other side. And as soon as we've gotten both sides done, we'll check back with you and let you know what's next. Okay, so you may find that as you use the draw knife, you get a whole bunch of these curly bits, and it's more than you can take out. This is another thing you can do with a big heavy shop knife. By the way, you can get these a lot of times at thrift stores. They're like sometimes as little as $2. If they have like no edge at all and they're really crummy and ugly, that's fine. Clean them up and sharpen them. You'd be amazed at how long you can use a knife like this. But you take your knife, okay, and you can take most of it off like that.
Oh man.
The rest of it that's more stubborn, you can actually pull like that, and it comes off. And we can clean up the rest of it with a rasp afterwards. Okay? So now we're going to go on to the next step, which is figuring out exactly what shape of handle we want. Catch you in a minute. Okay, so here's a quick pro tip for when you're setting up your actual grip. This is a replacement grip. This is an overgrip. Overgrips are what you use on your grip after your grip has totally worn out. Okay, so overgrip, these are 3 of them for $5. A grip, this is one of them for about $8. It is worth it to spend the $8 to get the replacement grip. So that's what you need to remember. And next, we're going to attach it. I went ahead and took one out of the package to show you what a replacement grip looks like. It's super important, by the way, to take all of this shiny plastic stuff off of the grip. That if you leave this stuff on there and you take that one off, and wait, there's still more of the shiny plastic stuff. Everybody has that experience. If you don't have this video to tell you that you need to take the shiny plastic stuff off. So that's a little bit of work. So we're going to go ahead and unroll this. Okay, this is about how much grip you get. And it's plenty for what we're doing. Because remember, they use this to redo tennis rackets. And down here at this end, you can usually get this. And that's how you pull this stuff off. Make sure you take this off or else this will not be useful to you at all. Okay, by the way, I'm dropping this on the floor. Don't do that. Okay, so now that you have this separated, the nice ones especially, the $8 ones, will have an adhesive strip that you expose by pulling on this white stuff, okay? Here, at the base of the grip, is where you will attach it. You'll peel back a little bit of the adhesive, and you'll put it as close to the bottom here as possible. Then you will, as you go along, you will peel the adhesive off and turn this slowly. And you want to get this on there so that the edges are just barely overlapping. And you turn it slowly. Now you want to give a little bit of tension here. You don't want it to be slack and you don't want to yank super tight. You want to make sure you're pulling just enough to have a little bit of tension on it, and that's all. So, you'll turn like so. Remember that with your fingers, you're also pulling off the adhesive strip. You get those edges to overlap, so you have a nice, tacky surface to grip while you're fighting. You go all the way to this mark here, and we're just going to take a second and do that right now. It doesn't actually take that long, but you do need to pay attention. And it is helpful if you are not making a YouTube video while you are trying to do this, because mistakes get made and then you have to start over. But through the magic of editing, this is going to look fantastic when we're done. So, you keep going like that. You see how I'm trying to keep these edges nice and even and slightly overlapping. You notice that there's a little bit of rise to each one of these. There's actually some pad in there. These replacement tennis grips feel really nice when you grip them because they have just a little bit of give. Also, these also absorb a little bit of sweat too. I wear a glove when I fight with these, but people who do bare hand these tend to report that they're super comfortable with or without a glove. So, we're almost done. We've gotten all the way up to the top marker here. Now, here's another kind of pro tip trick. Make sure you have either a little click sharp knife like this, okay, or a pair of shop shears. I highly recommend having both in your shop. And now we've gotten up to the top mark. What you do is you line up your knife or your shears with the mark, and you cut parallel with that mark. And what that does is it causes the top to finish off in a nice flat round. You finish the rest of the turn with the trimmed bit. And there's the top of your grip. All of these replacement grips come with a little stripe of tape. Go ahead and use it. They went ahead and provided it for you, so why not? Okay, you take off the little bits, and then you cover up the edge with that tape. Usually you've got enough to go around 1.5 times. You should take the trouble and do it so it lays down nice and flat if you can. Okay, grab it and kind of squeeze it and make sure it's as flat as you want it, okay? And we're just about done with the grip itself. This one is a little more taper than we normally do, but this is the way the Ukrainians wants it, so that's how we're going to do it. And now we're ready to move on to the next step, which is going to be to take care of the blade. Catch you on the next step. Okay, so before we take care of the blade though, if you want a thrusting tip, you need to add this step. Not everybody likes to fight with a thrusting tip. I do, and most of my students do. You don't have to, obviously, but this is how you make a good one if that's what you want to do. You start with using scrap of this camping blue foam. When you finish padding a helm, actually the new rules, at least in the West Kindom, say that we actually can't use this stuff. So now you've got some lying around probably. This is actually one of the only things you can do with it besides making other shaped weapons. You take your scrap, lay it on your table like that, take the end of your weapon, place it about like that, close to a corner so you're not wasting stuff, and trace around. And you're going to want to do this 3 times. I've got a couple more pieces here, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. So this is for making what's called a low profile thrusting tip. To my understanding, not every kingdom has these as an option, but in our kingdom and a lot of others they do. So I'm just going to show you how to make that kind. You basically make it this exact same diameter and geometry as the tip of your rattan weapon. You're going to take your shears. You can do this with a shop knife too, but I like doing it with shears. You're going to cut along the outside of the Sharpie mark. So just go around, there's no reason to hurry, make a nice round shape. If you end up making like a hexagon or an octagon, nobody's gonna die, okay? Except the people you're fighting, I hope. And I like making them a little rounder, but it's really okay to make it with flat edges. The tape cleans up a lot of irregularities in the shaping. Okay, so with a shape like this, what I'll do is I'll just separate it first, then we'll go ahead and cut that all the way off, all the way around. Try not to cut away any of the ink bits. We want it to be just a touch wider than the end if we can, and you'll see why in the end. At least that's how I like to make them. Okay, then we're gonna cut this last one out. Okay, now we have 3 discs. That's the thickness I like to make the thrusting tips that I built. Take your scraps, get rid of them. They get into everything, along with your scraps from this stuff. By the way, we're going to save the leftovers from that grip we made earlier, and you'll see why in a later step. But right now, I'm going to introduce you to your new best friend, which is strapping tape. The fiberglass fibers in here are very strong, and they really do a good job of protecting the blade. So what you do is you're going to take either this shop knife or our big scraping knife. Okay, I actually like to use a big scraping knife. And this part is generally done best with the edge of a table. You draw this out to, this is like a hand span and a half. I try not to use like numerical measurements because you're almost never going to have a ruler with you. Now you see where my finger is right there. Now I'm not going to try and cut my finger. That's so I have a little bit of the tape to work with after I make my cut. Okay. And now we have one stripe of tape. We're gonna make a couple more of those. And making these extra long is no big deal. Making them too short is really the only way you can make a mistake. So here's number 3, and you'll see what number 3 is for as well, just a sec. Now, handy pro tip, with rolls of strapping tape, when you're done with what you're doing, it's really important to fold over the edge a little bit so you have a tab to grab onto for your next stripe. Otherwise, invariably, it will rip into smaller stripes and it's really hard to get a complete stripe of this tape anymore. So, once you've done that, you're going to take your stick again, take your first disc, put it on the end just like that, take one of your stripes of tape and lay the tape with over the top with the disc centered on there. Now, don't drag this down. Don't put a bunch of pressure. Just make it snug so it doesn't compress the foam. You want the foam to compress on your opponent, not here. Otherwise, you defeated the purpose of having a thruster tip in the first place. So just go ahead, pull it very gently, okay? Now, the second one, you put perpendicular to that one in the same general arrangement of having the disc in the center. Lay that on over, smooth it out on both sides, get all of it smoothed down. Now, once you're done with that, what do you do with the third one? The third one is to secure this disc to the stick directly. You're going to do this perpendicular to all the rest of them, right up at the bottom, or at the top of the stick, underneath the foam. Don't actually compress the foam itself. That will make it harder for this thrusting tip to compress. It's not a good thing. So, lay it right there, okay? And we're going to go ahead and turn, securing this particular disc tightly to the stick. You'll repeat that process for the next 2 discs. With the last one, there's a special process and you'll see that in just a second. Okay, so we've attached the second disc. I want to remind you that you should probably rotate it about 45 degrees so that it doesn't come out like super square, okay? But for the third disc, you do something just a little different. You have 4 strips instead of 3. With the first one, you get it oriented in the center like you did before. Oops, gotta get that in the center. Boom, there you go. And aim it so it covers the corners. That keeps things a little rounder. It's just a nicer looking thrusting tip. So we're going to do that. Now, in the next one, instead of returning at 90 degrees, we're going to turn it 60 degrees. So this way we have like a hexagon instead of a cross on the top, or a snowflake, or whatever you want to call it. So that's about 60 degrees right there. Yeah, that'll do. Smooth that down. Now this one covers the last one. Now if you want to do all of them in that snowflake kind of star pattern, that's totally okay. I'm just a little lazy and I don't want to do the inner ones that way. But you can totally do that. But I think it is really important to make sure that you include the last stripe that secures each disc separately to the stick. Okay, it makes a stronger, longer lasting thrusting tip. And if you use your thrusting tip and your edges as much as I do, you want a thrusting tip that can put up a lot of abuse. Now, some fighters really like to have a stripe of thin leather that goes up and over the thrusting tip, which does protect the thrusting tip from edge work. However, I find that it adds enough weight to the tip that it messes with the overall mass of the weapon and the way the balance is. So I don't like it, but you can try it, and if you like it, drive on, have a good time. Okay, so the thrusting tip's done. So now what we're gonna do is tape the entire rest of the blade, and I'll catch you in the next step to do that. Okay, so now that we've finished the thrusting tip and we've got the grip on, now we're gonna take our strapping tape and we're gonna prep the rest of the blade. the way that we're going to do that is we're going to come down to about here. We've got all this tape that's attaching the thrusting tip, so we don't have to start way up here. But I like to start about where the perpendicular stripes stop. You lay that on there. Hold it up so you can see a little better. And you're going to pull and draw. Using your thumb helps secure it to the stick, and you want to be going down about half a stripe with each revolution around the stick. So it ends up looking like this. You also want to keep this real smooth if you can help it. Having a whole bunch of wrinkles in it means there's trapped air in there sometimes, and it's just not as strong apparently. So you're going to continue this process pretty much all the way down to right about here. There's no reason to go over the grip. We really want that to stay tacky, okay? And once you get down there, I'll be happy to show you the next step. All right, so if you don't mind having a little heavier stick, some folks like to put this medical or athletic tape on it. It's just cloth tape you can get at the drugstore or the sporting goods store. Check out both places before you buy it, because sometimes the drugstore is a lot more expensive than the sporting goods store, and it's exactly the same stuff, but not always. So you put this stuff on almost exactly the way you put on the strapping tape, except you don't have to overlap it near as much. You start here right under the thrusting tip, or a little down from it actually, because we're going to cover up the thrusting tip with some tape later. And again, keep it nice and flat. It flexes really nice on the lateral axis, so it goes on very smoothly. This gives your weapon a little more bite against your opponent, but it does make things heavier, so be aware. I'll catch you in the next step. Okay, so before we go on to attaching the cup hilt, here's a quick pro tip about any tape that's going around the thrusting tip, such as this red stuff for delineating the thrusting tip. When you're attaching this stuff, put your stripe on there just like you would expect,